And of course, one thing to point out is that, sorry, I'm going to come back to that if you don't mind. I lost my slide. So here, for example, is one map. You can't really see all the detail, but what we did was zoom in. We printed out these maps, so you see Atari spots in red, safe spaces in blue, bars are labeled on there. And since we couldn't give everyone in the community a GPS device and train them, what we did was print out the maps on A1 size paper, layer on tracing paper on top of that, and bring it to girls groups, community groups around the community, and ask them sort of which places do they feel safe, where do they feel more vulnerable, and try and develop sort of a consensus of what is happening. So we learned a lot about both behavioral and sort of temporal things. Behavioral being like, where do you go on a Saturday night? Where do you feel least comfortable? Temporal meaning, where are the places that you would avoid? Where are the places where there would be risk of non-consensual sex? And so, while this isn't a sort of scientific look at the vulnerability, it is, I think, an aggregation of how a number of young women in the community feel. And we've collected that in a report. This map in particular has just a few of the things that we summarized from the conversations with the girls groups. You can see where the carjacking, where there's no lights, because there's a number of lights in the community. Why they feel that the Nairobi Dam, which is a dried up area in the southwest corner of Kibera, is convenient for robbers and sexual predators. So one thing I found compelling about this is that when we got the maps into the hands of the groups, so there were a number of young girl advocacy groups. When we got the map into their hands, they were able to have a little bit more information about where they were going to do things like plan safe spaces. They were also using it as an educational tool, as an artifact for talking about what's happening in the community. So I want to stop for a second and play a clip from one of our star members.
Kibera is a village. It's a big slum, and it consists of 1.5 million people, where we have 13 villages. And we were 13 mappers according to the villages in Kibera. We were mapping a phase after phase, as in a theme after theme. That was started with health, and after health we went to security, where we mapped black spots. So for the markings, we normally go in the field with the GPS. It's a kind of a machine where we use it to take points, and also we normally use also working papers. As in, after taking a point, you write the place where you are. After that, we normally go to the library where we upload and edit whatever we've been mapping.
Where I live in Saba, around here, and in Saba, it's not safe at all. If I leave this place and go home at night, I have to switch off my phone and I get close to there so that it doesn't ring on the way and somebody snatches it. The villages which are not secured, it's because you don't have much of other lights. It's very dark. Alongside the railway, it's very, very, very risky.
There's a space, it's called Darajani, so you can't go to Darajani. And then there's another one in Korakora, so you can't go beyond the we have a certain group of boys who are known to be thugs. So when you go there beyond that time, they can take your phones, beat you up, take your money, anything that you have that is valuable, and maybe rape you.
What makes a place a black spot is, as in a place where you can't move or you can't walk beyond a given time. Let me say like beyond 9, you can't pass there. Like young girls cannot even pass there. If you pass there, they can be raped and also be hijacked and murdered. The security of girls nowadays in Kibera is a little bit fair compared to the last years, let me say. But this year it's not that hard because they've been identified. The black spots have been identified after mapping. The map has had an impact to the girl security because after mapping we had a meeting, we discussed with them and we gave them the map and also educated them how Kibera is and where there are some black spots. And at the moment they know very well the way they can handle themselves as well. They are Kibera.
So I think you got just a little bit of, I think there was a tangible impact on the lives of the mappers who sort of gained some technical skills. They're now sort of wanted throughout the community for their technical skills and ability to convey these larger issues. And so I think that, that ability for advocacy along with the other organizations in the community was an enormous opportunity. We also worked with the Kenya Country Office in the UNICEF Kenya Country Office. And I think one of the big next steps is to look at how this links with policy making, with planners, and used as a tool to understand deeper knowledge about what's happening in some of these communities where there wasn't a lot of data, there wasn't a lot of access to information. And of course there were a number of challenges as well. So some of them being economic, the notion of volunteerism in a place where there's low access to economic opportunities is challenging. Also some of the technical skills. While most people learned how to upload this information and take these points for GPS in a week or two, there was still some technical challenges and some data missing. We had to go back to it. So if we're looking at sort of how this self-representational knowledge is meaningful for people who are planners and thinkers about policy, we want to also make sure we get the data right. So that's sort of the progression from mapping, bringing the mappers on, creating the base map, going deep dive into different themes, and sort of where the project stands. So why don't I stop there? There's plenty more to say, but we'll go from there.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Josh. Are there any questions about the initiative? Yes, Carlos?
My question is related to the work and the impact on the male population, in the sense that when they said that a girl would feel threatened 20 times a day, I think that even though the statistic is so large, or the impact can be so big, I don't think that as males we can ever really understand what it is to be a woman under threat. So my question is, has this project influenced the perception of the male community in the village?
Maybe you have first-hand experience. I can talk to the premise, but not the conclusion.
Well, I would just say that, one thing about the map as sort of a pedagogical tool is that it can be used for, as a base of the conversation. So we didn't necessarily target young men per se. We did have some young mappers who were men, but I think that question will be bared out in terms of the educational content of the map to some extent, and how it's used as sort of an asset that can be used as a base for a conversation. But I do think the mappers themselves who went through the process learned quite a bit. Having this tangible asset of a map seems to be like a really motivational sort of tool for actually engaging on some of these issues in a way that would be strictly anecdotal, would not really have a context otherwise in a tangible way.
I think the real question is, okay, we spend $100,000 on this. What's the next step? Is anyone actually better off other than a couple dozen mappers and their families who know about the project? And the Kenya Country Office, first of all, this was done with their full support. The regional office actually was helpful as well. And the Kenya Country Office does want to follow up to be sure that men and others in power in the community actually use this documentation data to make changes. That is ongoing and, of course, never is as fast as you would want. You think, in fact, the MP for this huge agglomeration of slums there is Rilo Odega, who's in a position to make all sorts of changes. And getting his attention, getting the attention of local authorities has been obviously a challenge. There is both the Give-Me-Some Country Office and the mappers themselves. There's now what's called the MapKiberia Foundation or something. MapKiberia Trust, which is a Kenyan-run organization that was learned from these American military map people and wants to use this information as for advocacy and leadership tools in the community. But we are not there yet, and I think to say that this has had an impact on men who were otherwise, whose behavior was threatening to women, maybe even without their knowledge or intention, but certainly sometimes with their knowledge and intention, is not clear. We certainly don't have any impact yet.
I think that's right. One exciting thing that's I see the potential for is how this can be used in ways that we can't predict, right? Advocacy groups in the community who now have access to this data, who can promote the policies and the changes that they care about. And that's been really, really hard work from the sort of nearly a dozen groups that we worked with and continue to be working with MapKiberia on the ground today. That link between people like Rilo Odinga, even people like local people who provide local constituency development funds, how they interact with the dynamic with, say, a local young girl advocate is something that's still being ferreted out. But my hope is that these people who have visions for their own community can use some of this data and some of this information as well as a salvo in their attempts to create the change that they want to see.